Welcome everybody. We're back again for another roundtable. Thank you for joining us. Again, we have Biraj, Daryl, Kevin, Paul and myself, Kerry. And we're here to debate another question and answer best as we can how we feel about a different situation. So tonight what we're looking at is, should companies support their workforce to get involved in Black Lives Matter, or should they not? And there may be a different view depending on where you come from on this particular point. So after George Floyd incident, and obviously his tragic death in the United States, there was a lot of companies that came out and acknowledged the problem and said that they had solidarity with the Black community and that they were going to change things in their organisation. And it was termed conscious capitalism. So there was more steps put forward, but whether that will actually translate in anything and be an interesting point. And if company cultures allow more debate within an organisation, is that going to cause more problems? Are there going to be more ill feeling within businesses about bringing up the Black Lives Matter within a workforce? So I don't think this is a straightforward question or a straightforward answer. And it may very well mean that going forward, we need to look at our workforces differently, and we need to think about how we might consider not just racism, but all the isms which we have within our workforces. So what I'd like to do is to talk to each member of the team in turn and just see what our views might be, and then see if we can come to some kind of agreement, or if not agreement, at least different points of view on what might make things better going forward. So on that note, I'd like to start with Daryl. Daryl, obviously you've worked in business in different ways, in different companies. And how do you feel that this should be brought up within companies? Should we politicise, if you like, something like this into a business, or should it be kept outside of the business? What's your view on this kind of subject?
Yeah, I think there's two angles to this one. When I first kind of looked at this, when it first came out, my initial reaction was we absolutely need to, promote this. But I think as with anything, as with any movement, there's always different agendas that get tagged onto the side of this. And I think from a company standpoint, if you allow support for the political agenda behind it, we've heard about, some demonstrations, etc., have mentioned about defunding the police and bringing down capitalism and stuff like that. That bit I kind of struggle with in terms of, is that going too far away from what the majority of people see as the cause of Black Lives Matter? If you're going to encourage your employees and your business to support the ethical and morality behind this, to make sure that there is not just not being racist but becoming anti-racist, and to become aware of where the problems have come from in the past. I grew up in a very diverse area of North London, and I never saw myself as racist, and it's only really in the last 3 to 6 months where I've actually looked at myself and thought, hang on a minute, I'm not racist. However, have I actually stood up and made a public announcement on social media in this instance to say, I don't agree with this? I haven't been an anti-racist. I've turned a blind eye to stuff that's gone on and stuff like that. Does that make me right or wrong? Who knows? All I can do is look at how I've approached things, how I've approached problems in the workplace, and make conscious decisions going forward for the benefit of myself and for people that work for me and with me. So I think, it's very, very key here that we make the segregation between supporting political agendas and focusing in on the ethical and morality aspect of what this movement is actually designed to achieve.
That's really interesting, and to have that business view. And I know, Kevin, you've done a number of webinars and podcasts around different aspects around this kind of situation, and also your own personal. I know you've been very, you've opened up about how you feel about things that have happened to you and people you know, etc. So, having heard what Daryl says, what's your view about how we should take this forward as a society and in business in particular?
Well, I don't view it as a political issue.
Okay.
Because I think it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, the issue is still the same. It's a structural societal issue, and which this is what, going to Daryl's point about anti-racism. I'm not racist because I've got a black friend, or I've never said anything racist in my life, is not necessarily good enough anymore. In fact, for me, it isn't. And I was the same. Like, I've talked about all of the some of the racist incidents I've experienced in my life. But the point was, I never said anything to anybody. I didn't call it out. And I saw it happen to people that looked like me. I didn't say anything because I became desensitized to it, because they didn't get beaten up. They weren't bloodied and they weren't hospitalized. So, okay, sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That, I remember hearing that as you grew up, right? Yeah, but it does. There's a mental impact. You carry this burden around with you. I was saying to a friend the other day, I was saying, like, one of the reasons I posted it, because I think I've done all right in life. And that's my point, is people see me come in and literally something's happened on my way to work. And I might not be at 100%, but you don't really see that, because I don't go and tell you, oh yeah, this happened to me on my way into work. I just get my head down and try and progress in my job. And I do think companies need to take this into account. And this goes into, what we talked about in one of our other discussions on diversity and inclusion. The point of equity is part of the point of equity is, I have to come in every day with this burden of, how long is it going to take to get home? Because am I going to get stopped because of the car I'm driving in? You're constantly, I'm not joking. I walk into certain places and I'm looking, I know where the exits are. And, and it's always sometimes like, if it kicks off, I've got to go that way, whereas other people, and I'm going to just, white people can walk into a bar with other people that look like them, and they're thinking about, well, what drink am I going to get? They're not thinking, how do I get out of here if it kicks off? So I do believe companies, because unless any company is going to say, we don't see there's a problem with society and race and a structural issue with racism, then you have to do something, because it does affect your workforce. It continues to allow biases to happen, and your business might be where it is now and have a certain type of demographic, but that's not necessarily going to be the case in 30 years time, 40 years time. And unless you're, one of those companies that just think, well, we don't really care about our long-term future. We're just here for the 3-year ride or the 5-year ride, and who cares? It's not my problem. It's the next generations or 3 generations down. Fine, don't do anything. But I think I genuinely believe, and it's not just this issue. Actually, you look at what happened after the #MeToo. There's conscious consumerism now as well. I experienced this with there's a brand of I was having this conversation this morning. There's a fast food joint, Chick-fil-A. Love their chicken burgers. One of the best foods I tasted when I first moved to America was fast food. It wasn't like Wendy's or anything like that. It was good. And I also liked them. I didn't realize why. They weren't open on Sundays. So I was like, oh, this must be a pretty good company. They're treating their employees well. They don't open on a Sunday. That's sort of good. Then I realized that's because the founders, it's a religious belief that you don't work on a Sunday. It's like, well, it's still good. And then they made some comments related to, I believe it was the LGBTQ community, which didn't sit well with me. So it's like, that was the last Chick-fil-A I ever had, and now I know they've retracted the comments, but for me it's too late. Like, that is who you are, and you can retract those comments, but underlying that pervades through your organization. So I do believe businesses were anyway moving towards a more purpose-driven, aligning with their core values and their purposes, and then workers were aligning with those, and you're seeing much more movement, particularly with the younger generation of workers, who, I say younger generation, they're coming to become the predominant population of the workforce, that they're willing to move, because they don't just work for the paycheck, they work for the purpose. And if your purpose doesn't align with theirs, you're going to lose it, and you're going to lose talent. And so I think, just for survival, companies need to do the right thing, and this is the right thing to do.
I think I pick up quite a few points from that. I think one is the generational thing. I was listening to one of the women who was on a march, and she was saying her parents said, when we came to the UK, don't speak up, be quiet, meld into the background, you know, don't cause a fuss, don't stand out, just get on, do your job, work hard, get your children through, you know, education. And their generation now, their children's generation, don't think that way. They think differently, and that's what she was saying. And that's really interesting about generational stuff. The other thing that comes through, and what shocks me a little bit, is how I didn't realise how, as a white person, how black people felt in certain situations, like you said about going into a bar and those kinds of things, because it would never have occurred to me to think about how you or someone else like you might, in terms of race, would feel about that situation. And that's really quite hard to take, that I've got to a certain age and I've not realised that is happening.
Yeah, but I think
I don't know about
awareness thing, isn't it?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Kerry, just to cover, but I think this is the awareness thing, and I think this is the point about why it must become an anti-racist approach. You know, not just turning a blind eye and not saying, well, it's not my problem, I can't do anything about this. It's, you know, very small. It's that age-old thing. Very small actions by a lot of people make systematic change, and this is what we're talking about. So I think, you know, this defines what you said there and what Kevin said there about walking into a bar. You know, people going about, what do you mean white privilege? Well, right there is a very basic example of what white privilege is. We can walk into a bar, we can look around there and go, oh, don't like look at this, and we can walk out if we like. No one bat an eyelid if we walked in a bar and walked out. And that is the point. That is a very basic example of a white privilege, which needs to be understood, where the differences lie. Awareness is then become made, and we can actually systematically change the approach within society.
Absolutely. And I want to ask Paul, because I think about listening and learning, and in business and in organisations, how can we do better? Because I take on board what Daryl's saying about how we have to change things. We have to change the way we look and we think about things. But what do you think, Paul? Because it's an interesting debate about what we listen about and what we learn from those things and what we change.
And we all have personal experiences in different way. One of my earlier experiences of white privilege, as we've just said, was when I was 17. A group of us went to a bar, and I took my 1977 Ford Fiesta, and one of my bosses, that was a black guy, he took his Ford convertible. And as we're going out and we get there, we've had our fun and the night out and coming back, and he looked at me and said, "You need to be prepared now." I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "I guarantee you that we get at least one police car that will trail us as we drive back." No, that's never happened. Why would they do that? He went, "Just you watch." Sure enough, we got out where we want. Police car started trailing us, pulled the car over. No reason whatsoever. We were both just driving in convoy, pulled the car over. The guy driving the car was a black police officer. And he was the one that told me to expect this. That taught me something about how difficult it can be in certain situations. Now I try and translate that into a business environment, and without that experience, I wouldn't think, your example of the bar, I wouldn't think that way. So somehow businesses have to enable education and awareness. They have to make it okay to have that dialogue, because it's not comfortable. It's not easy. Biraj, in an earlier conversation, you said, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. It's not a naturally comfortable thing to bring up. So businesses have to train the leaders. There's got to be some training at a very senior level to raise the awareness. Starts at the board, executive committees, next level down, and cascade it down. You can't expect everybody to have the same understanding without having the same awareness and the education that goes with it. And I think a business has a responsibility to help that happen. Kevin used the words, there's a business case for Black Lives Matter. There is a business case. And when there's a business case, businesses will move and they will act on it. But there's also the moral case. Now, the only exemption that I put on that is when it gets into violence. You know, a company can't have its employees going out and taking things into their own hands. Is it right for someone to go kick someone else's door down in because they want to vent frustration? No. And I think that the businesses will have to look at things and say, that's not an acceptable way to support Black Lives Matter. Here's what we will do as an organization to support it, and here's how you as an employee can contribute to that. I think that's how businesses should start to move forward.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'd like to take this on now to Biraj, and one of the things that I picked up was that there was an Instagram poll conducted by a networking group called Black and HR, and they found that 77% of respondents said their workplace had not addressed what had been happening in the Black community. So what I want to ask you really is, how do we make space for discussion, a voice in the workplace? How do we allow these experiences to come into the workplace so that we can do some of the things that other people in the group have said around training leaders, awareness, getting that education and changing things from within? And I absolutely agree about we can't just say we're not racist. We've got to do more. We've got to do some positive things. So what do you think that looks like, Biraj?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'm not surprised by that percentage number that you mentioned there, because I think that many organisations have just not acknowledged this topic that is fundamentally a global topic that you can't really avoid. On the same note, I don't think organisations should be singing and dancing about, oh, this is what we're doing about Black Lives Matter, because ultimately what that's saying is we've done nothing up until now, and now we're going to do something about that. So I don't think it needs to be something that is publicized in that respect, but internally, 100%, I think all organizations need to address the matter and basically, make a stance to say that it's not okay, and this is what we as a leadership team or executive team or whatever it may be are going to do about that, or just actually say it's not okay, but we don't have the policies and the procedures and the forums in place right now, but we want to put that into place. Because I feel a lot of people will be more receptive to that honest view rather than this rah-rah, hey guys, we're all for Black Lives Matter, when in theory you've done nothing about it for the last X number of years, because that's just false. And I think there's a lot of people that are doing that. I run a private Facebook group for males, specifically around mental health and well-being, and I actually had someone on that group mention, it was a white guy who mentioned about how uncomfortable he was about what was going on right now, but didn't necessarily want to go and post his support for Black Lives Matter, because he felt that that was being quite hypocritical, because he'd never mentioned anything about it up until that point. And so he didn't want people to feel that he's now being fake and promoting and supporting Black Lives Matter, when in theory he hadn't done anything about it before. However, he genuinely doesn't have a racist bone in his body. He just never really mentioned it previously. And so he felt deeply uncomfortable, and he actually had the courage to put it on the group and say, guys, you know, what do I do about this situation? And what was interesting was that there were lots of ethnic minority people that were basically saying to him that you don't have to show your support by putting a post on your Instagram page that says Black Lives Matter, or the black squares and stuff like that that everyone was posting at the time. You don't need to do that. Just carry on being who you are. You've got lots of diverse friends. You know, you haven't got a mean or racist bone in your body. Carry on doing that, because that shows that you're supporting Black Lives Matter in its own way. So, you know, going back to your question there, Kerry, I don't think I'm not surprised by that at all, and it does. It hurts me to know that so many people feel like that, and you know, ultimately it means that there's too many organisations out there that are not acknowledging that this is an issue in this world. And you know, like Kevin, I myself, growing up, have experienced racism, and yes, we brush it off, but as Kevin said, you know, it does hurt, and it does segregate you. It does make you feel isolated, and especially if you're growing up in an area or in a school or in an organisation where you genuinely are a minority. It is exclusion ultimately, and it's a horrible feeling. And you know, I actually struggled to even think about how to even start to explain this to my 10-year-old son, who potentially is going to go through a lot of this himself in his future life. You know, I asked him about, does he know what's going on, and he didn't have a clue. It's like, how do you even start that conversation with a 10-year-old and explain the struggles that we've had growing up? So I think there is a duty for organisations to address this matter, but address it in a genuine way, not just for the sake of doing it.
Thank you, Viraj. I think everybody's contribution to this particular subject matter is heartfelt, and I think going forward, well, there'll be a lot more debate around this about how we do this, because I don't think it's easy for businesses, and I'm sure there's some that haven't thought about it, but there's some that probably have thought about it but just don't know how to deal with this at the moment. I think I've taken from this that there's certain things around an honest conversation, that it needs to be honest, it needs to be genuine, there needs to be some standards, there needs to be some thought about how you might take this into an organisation and deal with it. I think there's some sadness from my perspective that I've got to this point in my life and I didn't realise quite how people from different ethnic groups have had to suffer in terms of their childhood and their working life, and I say that openly. I'm quite sad that this has kind of opened my eyes to more than I realised, and I think we all of us have to work together with this. It's not just Black people who are creating obviously the momentum for this. I think there are a lot of white people on those marches as well who've gone out there and said, you know, we support this and we want to do something to make this better for everybody. So I think we all need to find a way within whatever our life is, like you said, Biraj, with your colleague or friend that commented, to do the things that we can do individually to try and make things better for us, for ourselves, for our friends, for our colleagues, whatever it might be going forward, and actually not stand by, as Daryl says, and watch and allow things to happen as we might have done in the past, but actually to stand up for those convictions and say it's wrong if we see something that's wrong, and actually not tolerate it anymore. And I think if we all did that going forward, then from whatever background you come from, then I think we will take some steps towards making some change going forward. So I hope that kind of is everyone can kind of buy into that sort of summary in terms of what I've made there. I would just like to thank everybody for contributing. It's quite a tough subject matter to discuss, I think, and sometimes uncomfortable, I think, for white people to acknowledge. And I hope everybody's enjoyed listening to this debate. If you'd like to contribute, if you'd like to add any comments, join in with us to take this forward. We'd really appreciate you doing so. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you very much from the group.